Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So I've been putting together this build for the Shield Crush Gladiator for a couple of weeks now. In fact, looking at time played, let's just have a look at it. How many hours played? We got 3 days and 10 hours into this mofo, and I tell you what, we're at a whole different level of power with this thing. This is maybe one of the strongest builds I've put together, and the amount of minning and maxing that I've done on this is unbelievable. But pretty much how this works is we're running Shield Bash, as you can see here. Now it is quite fast. We do have self-cast Val Molten Shell, and we'll talk about the gem setup shortly. Blood Rage is self-cast as well. You will need to put down your totems, which is pretty easy and nothing to it. I have made adjustments since everyone saw it on stream, and I'll talk about those adjustments, but basically the mechanic works of using max block, which is built into the Gladiator Ascendency through Pain Forge, Versatile Combatant, and Violent Retaliation. And looking at it from POB with the iteration of the build that I currently have, we're getting to about 8.7 attacks per second with Shield Crush, which, to put this into context, is about what the Zerker, the attack speed of the Zerker. As you can see, I took down the Crystal King pretty damn easily with this bastard, and tanked the Crystal King in Delve. It pretty much does everything. It does A8 Cyrus, T16 maps. It's a strong and competent Delver, and everything else in between. But yeah, anyway, we'll talk about that as we get into the build. Mechanically, this is pretty simple. Literally, I don't know what else to say. You've got your Enduring Cry mapped to your move button, so you crack that as you go. We'll talk about the trees soon. You basically jump around with your Leap Slam, proc your Fortify, and then just sit on enemies and Shield Crush them until they die. That's pretty much how this build works. Nothing else to it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyway, we'll talk about it when we get into the build guide. Now, I will note this is completely min and maxed. I have put progress trees in, and this will be all throughout this build guide. I've written in the notes section in the POB this time as well to provide a little bit more information about leveling. We're going to flesh this out a lot more than past build guides, but try and keep it as short as possible. But this one's going to be a bit of a long one because there's a lot that goes into it. But anyway, I digress. Let's get into the guide. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need for this build to get it to kick is a Prismatic Eclipse. This is a pretty straightforward blade, nothing crazy to it. This is going to give you that attack speed that you need to really get this build popping. Now, I should also note with this is it needs to have all green sockets. Also, you'll start off with a non-corrupted version, but as you move into the end game, you'll need to have a look at getting a corrupted version of this with an implicit corrupt for resolute technique, which basically means that takes away your ability to crit, but it also means you save a bunch of skill points on your tree, so you can reallocate those to using a clustered duel, which is what this particular build uses to really get that damage popping into the end game. Now, the second thing that you're going to need to get this build going is it's going to need a tower shield or an endgame shield with at least 2500 armor. Now, I'll talk about what to use in the section when we get on to early leveling and even early mapping, but pretty much the way that Shield Crush scales is off of every 15 armor you get physical damage scaled onto your ability. This is important, so the more armor that you have on your shield, the more damage you're going to be doing. So if you can get as close to 3000 armor on your shield as you possibly can, then that's the goal. It doesn't really matter about whatever other stats. In this case, I've actually managed to manage my intelligence on my shield, but you don't have to do that. As long as you've got enough armor to be able to do the damage output that you need, getting it as close to 3000 is pretty much the goal with this particular piece of gearing. Now, for your gloves, you're going to be using the Hemophilia. What this does is it's going to proc bleed. The way that this build actually works is it does proc bleed. We do have Crimson Dance in the tree, but we only use it as a damage multiplier. And as you can see, you get 30% 30% increased attack damage against bleeding enemies. You also get the bleed pop effect of this as well, which is really good for clearing large packs later in the game. Dot doesn't really matter, we're not playing anything like SST, so that's all good. For the boots that you're going to run, you're pretty much just going to focus for maximum health, whatever health you can get into the boots, and any resistances that you need. Obviously 30% movement speed is ideal, and any other stat that you can craft on there that gives you a bit of an upper hand or survivability, then go for that on your boots as well. There's nothing crazy in this. If you want to get a Redeemer set of boots and get Onslaught crafted onto them, then that's also an option. Entirely up to you. This is something open that you can play with and do with what you will. Okay, so in this case, I am using a helm with a Pride enchant. The reason why I'm using this is because I'm using an All's Uprising, which is giving me the ability to introduce haste into this build with no mana cost. Unfortunately, in my original videos and original POBs, and there will be the alternate version, I did have an amulet that did have Pride Reservation Reduction crafted onto it, but I've since changed this out and included this on the helm. Now everything else that you need on the helm is basically life and any resistances that you can pack on it. For the belt, I am using a Reslyth's Coil. This is pretty much the best in slot belt that you can get. It's not cheap, they're like 3 to 5x, depending on where it is in the league. At this very point in time, it's probably a little cheaper than when I bought it, or it could be more expensive. I haven't actually checked the price of this because it will fluctuate by the time this video comes out. For the chest piece, pretty much as much health as you can get. This is not the best chest piece, and I do have one that I'm 6 linking that will be better than this, but this one gets me up to just shy of 6k HP. Pretty much you want any resistances you can get on it that you need to get you over the gap, and as much HP or much maximum life as you can stack on this chest piece. That's where you want to be at the end of the day. For the rings that you'll need and the amulet, you'll be looking at, in the instance of my build, I'm using a Vermilion ring in my left hand. This is basically working at getting as much life as I possibly can onto the build, as well as dealing with resistances. And I've also crafted on some physical damage to attacks to make this pop off a little more. In my right ring socket, I've actually used an unset ring. This is how I've managed to fit so many skills into the build itself and cram in haste, cram in a bunch of other stuff. With this, I'm also using, so this could be a better ring with more HP rolled onto it, but it actually does have curse enemies with vulnerability on hit. Now, the alternative way to get this would be to get it corrupted onto a set of gloves, your hemophilia gloves. The problem is that type of item is going to set you back 4 to 6 exalt right now, whereas this ring is relatively straightforward and easier, much easier to procure than others. You don't necessarily need to have an unset ring, but as long as it's got that vulnerability on hit, that's what's important. Now, the other thing that I've done in this build that I don't believe anybody else has done from what I've benchmarked is I actually did take down the Crystal King, which you'll see at the B-roll at the start of this build guide, and I did have an All's Uprising drop with a haste no reservation craft on it. Now, this is not necessarily, or this is not an item that you need on this build, and a much cheaper option than this particular item would be a amulet with a Pride mana reservation reduction roll, and this would mean you wouldn't need to get the enchant on your helm. There will be a second tree, a second POB in the description with that particular variation of this build. The damage that we're talking about is less than 250,000 DPS, but the attack speed does make a difference, and that's the difference between being 8.16 attacks per second and 8.7 attacks per second. But it's entirely up to you as the player and user of the build as to which variation you go. Either is very strong, and you won't really notice too much of a difference aside from just a little bit more attack speed in one than the other. But both versions are completely fine to go with. For the jewels that you'll be using in this build, so this does use a large cluster jewel. In particular, it does use Feed the Fury, Fuel the Fight, and Smite the Weak. This is all synergizing with maximizing your attack speed, bleaching damage, everything else in between. Now for any other dual socket that you put in, except for Lethal Pride, and I will note you do not necessarily need Lethal Pride, it just gives you bonuses for the nodes that you already allocate. You could easily just use a standard dual like the one I've got set here. So for every other dual in the build, regardless of what it is, I'm basically going attack speed while holding a shield and maximum life and any other attribute. Now there are duels that you can get with multi-attack speed, which I do have one in my build. They are about 70 chaos to 100 chaos a duel. So it's really how high is the sky scenario. I'm managing my allocation of dexterity and intelligence through my duels, which means I don't have to allocate an extra node on the tree, which is more efficient for my build. You don't have to do this. You can take alternate routes around this. It's entirely up to you. This is the direction that I've chosen with this build. But if you want to invest more into the duels, you absolutely can. There's nothing wrong with going as far as you need to go to get as much power as possible out of this build. For skill gems, in the helm you're going to be running Reckoning, Onslaught, Maim, and Fortify. Now you can switch Fortify out for life gain on hit, entirely up to you. This is also the best way to generate Onslaught, short of having it crafted onto your boots, and a much cheaper way to go about it. For the chest, you're going to be running Shield Crush, and if you can get Anomalous Shield Crush, even better. This will give you 10% increased attack speed with Shield Crush. If you can't, the normal version is just fine. Brutality, merely physical damage, Impale, Multi-Strike, and Life Tap. Life Tap's incredibly important because this is how we negate the impacts of the changes to mana in the 3.15 league and, you know, do the amount of damage output at the speeds that we're going at as such of the footage that you've seen at the start of the video. Now for boots, Leap Slam, again, Life Tap, Fortify, and Enduring Cry, again removing the requirement for any type of mana usage in this front. In the weapon, we're going to be running Blood Rage, Haste, and Portal. In the shield, Flesh and Stone, Pride, Blood and Sand. In your gloves, you're going to be running Ancestral War Chief. If you can get Val Ancestral War Chief, even better. Ancestral Protector, Dread Banner, and multiple totem support. And in the ring, you're going to be running a Val Molten Shell. Now, the reason why we can run so many different types of skills, as in reserved mana auras, is off the back of number one, having All's Uprising as the amulet to be able to run haste with no reservation, and also having the Pride mana reservation reduction in the helm. Now, short of taking haste out of the build, you can switch it out for an amulet that has Pride mana reservation reduction, and that's how you're going to be able to run Pride, Flesh and Stone, Blood and Sand, and Dread Banner synonymously, so that you, or simultaneously, so that you don't have any issues with mana reservation. But these are the skills that you're going to be running in this particular build. Okay, so for the tree, this one I've done a bit differently than how I've done other build guides for you guys. So I've actually given you 3 iterations of the tree, which break it down from level 26 through to 57 through to 94 to make this a little bit easier. So if we talk this through on screen, as we could see it here, from level 1 through to 26, we want to target getting Bloodletting, get this Defiance node, move down, get Golem's Blood, and we want to go to Retaliation. Now, as we go to 57, we're going to introduce gems. Now, you're not necessarily going to have this Lethal Pride straight off the bat at League Start, and I did do this League Start, so this is possible to do this character League Start. It scales really well. But basically from there, we're going to go to Crimson Dance. We're going to pick up this Command of Steel node as soon as we can. And then we're going to branch out, grab Constitution to start getting our life up. Move down, we want to target and get Call to Arms. This means that we can always have Enduring Cry popping as we run, because we'll map it to our move button. We're going to get Bloodless, and then we're going to shift all the way up and get Resolute Technique, because we're not going to have a Prismatic Eclipse yet with Resolute Technique corrupted onto it, though we might have a Prismatic Eclipse by this point. It's probably not going to be that good. And then we're going to go to Barbarism, we're going to pick up Juggernaut, and we're going to pick up Aggressive Bastion. This is all going to help synergize with getting your max block stats up as well, and we'll go from there. Then we're going to go, and we're going to scale this up one more. We're going to level 94. So, at this point, from level 57 through to 94, the first things that you're going to focus on will be going through to get Solidarity, get Born to Fight. This is going to increase your life pool with Heart of the Warrior, increase to life regeneration, it's going to increase your max block as well. This is important. Now, as you'll note, from 57 through to 94, we've taken off Resolute Technique. This is because at this stage, we're aiming to try and get that blade with Resolute Technique ASAP. Alternatively, if you haven't got that yet, you can keep Resolute Technique on. You just need to take off 1 point in the tree or 2 points in the tree somewhere around here. It's entirely up to you how you manage that. And then I'll just do the comparative here. So from there, we're going to come back down. We're going to get a cluster jewel in here as soon as we can, and we're going to start bridging this out. Now, you're not necessarily going to have exactly this cluster jewel. This is a 2 to 4x cluster jewel, but get started. This is going to give you a big damage buff and increase. If you can at least get Feed the Fury and Fuel the Fight, or Smite the Weak and Feed the Fury, really important to get. That's going to give you increases in attack speed and leech. Sorry, Fuel the Fight and Smite the Weak. This is going to give you attack speed and leech, and it's also going to give you maim on hit. Maim's really important. 40% increased damage against enemies that are maimed is incredibly important. Now, coming back down here, we're going to pick the rest of our shield nodes up. This is going to increase our block chance. This is also going to, gladiatorial combat's going to increase our attack damage per the 75 armor on our shield. We also want to pick up this dual socket up here. We want to try and finish this Constitution wheel as well, and also pick up Forceful Skewering, and also have our Swift Skewering, Crimson Dance, and our Rampant, so we can generate a lot more damage off of having Fortify, as well as Bleed, and maximize our Impale. That's pretty much the tree. So looking at the Ascendencies in sequence, we're going to go for Painforged first, then we'll get Versatile Combatant second, then we will get Violent Retaliation. This is going to get us to max block. And lastly, we're going to go Arena Challenger. And this is where our speed starts to pick up, because this is going to give us Challenger charges. Challenger, you get maximum of 10, 2% more attack and movement speed per Challenger charge, which makes it a lot more sustainable to run the Gladiator as a shield crush character using attack speed. Now, you do need to switch between your blood and sand, your blood stance and your sand stance. The reason why is when you're in blood stance, you're going to generate charges for Challenger when you hit an enemy boss. It's 25% per hit that you'll get that, or 25% chance per hit. And then when you're farming, you'll generate charges from killing packs as well. So that's pretty much how it works. That's the tree. I should also note that in the Pantheon, you're going to take, we are going, get off there. So in the Pantheon, we would take pretty much anything to reduce dot. So Son of Arakali, and then we're going to take, in my case, I took Soul of Raslitha. You can also take Soul of Shikari. Dot is the weakness of this build, and if we can mitigate it in any possible way, that's exactly what we want to do. But that's pretty much the tree. It's pretty straightforward. The two different POBs using both the Pride Amulet and also the All's Uprising Amulets will be in the description, and I'll clearly mark which POB to work on. Both of these will have these trees built into them, and we'll talk about the notes section very shortly as well. Alright, so first time adding this into a build guide, but I thought I'd make this a little easier for those who aren't as accustomed to running builds like this and league starting efficiently. So you'll find this in the notes section in the path of building in both versions that I'm going to put up. But basically, early leveling, you pretty much want to start with Ground Slam and Perforate, or Perforate, one of the two. Normally, I will run a Ground Slam, a roll of Ground Slam duel, and basically just run a 2H two-handed mace or a hammer or something like that, and scale up as you go. The other alternative, or the other thing that you can do, or that you will need to do throughout this process too, is once you get to a point where you can get your hands on Spectral Shield Throw, switch to Spectral Shield Throw. The scaling of a 4-link with Spectral Shield Throw is incredibly powerful. Now, whether they nerf that in future leagues, I don't know. This league, it's unbelievable. And then basically use that to get your way through the campaign until you get through to Act 10. And that's when we start looking at other things, such as gearing and things like that. You may find that you'll need to use Spectral Shield Throw even up to about T5 maps to efficiently clear mapping. It's a really safe skill to use when you're using max block. It's widely used this league on all Gladiator builds. It's pretty much the gateway to getting to Shield Crush. Shield Crush is sort of an end game build. Now you can take a punt and have a crack at Shield Crush if you want earlier on, It is a little bit more risky without having you max cap your resistances, and that's another thing. Make sure you max cap your resistances as well. That's really important to get this build to actually get it to work. Shield Crush can be really slow and clunky at the start too. It's not fast straight off the bat, but you'll get it there eventually. Now, the gear to focus on when you're early leveling and when you get into maps will be as soon as you can get a Magma Eclipse shield. This gives you about 1600 armor. It's a unique item and it's pretty damn cheap. And this is going to be the first shield that you get, basically, to get you enough armor before you can afford a better shield. Unless you've already rolled a character and you can't afford a 25 or 27 or 3000 armor shield, then get this first to start. Some people would go that, the Surrender is a great shield. It just doesn't have enough armor. Surrender is great for other different builds. It's not great for this particular build. Now, you want to max out your block nodes as soon as possible. If you follow the tree, go for your block nodes as soon as you can, wherever you can. Max block, once you're at it, makes it a hell of a lot easier to progress the game. Now, before you get a roll of pride on either your amulet or the reservation reduction on your helm, which can be quite hard because of lab, what you'll need to do is run Herald of Purity. So this will buff your damage up temporarily. It means that you don't get the blind off of having Flesh and Stone straight off the bat. You could either run Flesh and Stone or Blood or Sand. Blood and Sand. I would be running Blood and Sand first before Flesh and Stone, and that's what I did. And before I got the right amulet, I actually ran I ran Herald of Purity until I was able to get the amulet and switch to Flesh and Stone. Now, Ascendencies in order, as already discussed: Painforge, Versatile Combatant, Violent Retaliation, Arena Challenger. Follow this, you'll do well in Uber Lab, and you should be able to pretty much get through all the labs pretty easily. Main stats you'll need on Jules: attack speed with shields, attack speed in general, maximum life, and any dex and intelligence that you can get. Now, switching to the cluster jewel, as discussed, this is the biggest tip. You will need to run Resolute Technique on the tree until you can get that corruption implicit on your sword. If you can't get that corruption implicit on your sword, you need to stick with Resolute Technique. This build does not work off Resolute Technique. You could try and go the crit route, and other builds do that. It's more complex to balance, and you need a lot more experience with the game to make that work. Or it needs a completely different methodology to the gearing, the underlying gearing that you go with. Now, can you run this setup with other Ascendencies? If you play with the tree, Slayer actually has more damage, but the problem is your defense goes to the shithouse, but you have huge amounts of leech. So if you can stack more health on your build, you could potentially run Slayer. You can get to 10,000 health or 9,000 HP, you probably got a damn good chance. The champion can do this build because it's got built-in Impale, and Master of Metal. But again, it depends on which route you want to go. I like max block. It's a lot safer in the way that the league works now, but if you want to take a crack at those, you can run exactly the same tree. You don't really need to change anything. The block still applies, everything else still applies. You just can't max it out, and running Reckoning is probably pointless at that point. Now, what content can it do? This build can pretty much do everything in the game. At least I haven't really struggled. It's actually a really competent Delve character. At the moment, I think I'm the third lowest character to go down in Delve, and I'm going to keep pushing down because I actually really like it. It's really good in Delve, and underrated. But yeah, it can pretty much do everything. I'm farming A8 Cyrus, doing everything else. Conquerors are easy, Guardians are easy. Yeah, nothing's really challenging right now, and this is 2 weeks into the league, so it's pretty damn good. Now, future upgrades: better chest, definitely. More HP, even better. The other thing is a Watcher's Eye with additional Impales. Now, this thing is worth like 12 to 14 Exalt, and I have not included it in this build because I don't, number one, don't have it, and number two, it's somewhat gratuitous, and I will eventually get it for this league, like, Awakened Multi-Strike as well, because I really want to see where that's going to pop off, but that's 16x as well. Those are the few improvements that can be made to this build, but this build is already pushing at the maximum reaches. It can go further, but it's really a how high is the sky scenario, and how much do you really want to invest into your build. If you just want to play one build for the league, or if you're going to go to a second build, if you get it to this point, you've done the work and done the yards, and it's going to work for you, and do all the content that you want. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so I hope this build guide answers your questions. Took a little bit of time to put this one together. I'm trying to improve my editing and make these things a lot more thorough because people ask a lot of questions, and I wanted to try and clear as many of those as I possibly could. Make a really beastie character to show people that, you know, while there are changes to the game, we can still have a lot of fucking fun with a skill that honestly nobody really knew about before we started. I actually really like Shield Crush. I think it's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed minning and maxing the shit out of this character and doing progress videos. I'll probably be working on a second character very shortly. But yeah, if you've got any questions about this build, feel free to put it in the comments. I'll answer any questions that you want to ask. If you want to challenge some things in this build, if you disagree with them and you think it could be done better, definitely happy to see some feedback down there, and I'll encompass that into it. But yeah, anyway, all the links will be in the description to the POBs that you'll need. I'll also put the notes section in the description as well, because I think that's really helpful for people. But yeah, if you like this video, like and sub, follow the channel. And yeah, until next time, have a good one, and bye.